Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. For those who registered for this webinar, Fear of Failure, and Is This Your World? And let me give you a few tips on how to debunk that fear. You will receive a copy in your email box. For those who are here live, thank you very much for joining me. I run these webinars live Friday mornings at 9 a.m. All right, so let's get on with it. Fear of failure. Is this your world? I have a couple of screens running here, so if it looks like I'm looking away, that's why. So firstly, what's up for discussion? How do we identify that we have a fear of failure in the first place? How does this fear affect our mental health? And some tips on how to debunk that fear. So firstly, we're going to talk about how we identify that we actually have a fear of failure. So fear of failure may affect many people in a variety of ways, which means that it's not always easy to identify. Some ways that people may experience fears may include believing that you don't have the skills or knowledge to achieve something, feeling like you won't be able to achieve your goals at all. You might find yourself procrastinating to the point that it affects your personal ability to actually finish at all or on time. The next slide has us at telling people that you will probably fail before you even start. That's a big one. So that your expectations tend to run quite low on yourself. You underestimate your own abilities pretty much at all times, and you have to avoid this feeling of letting yourself down. You start to worry that imperfections or these shortcomings will make other people think less of you. So that's the perfectionist side of it. And you start to really worry about whether or not you're going to disappoint others if you fail. So in some cases, the fear of failure really may cause people to avoid trying to do something altogether. And this is primarily because they're afraid that if they do try and they don't succeed, that they will be looked upon with disappointment. They'll have their own embarrassment and their own disappointment. And it's sort of a way of preventing pain in a way, some limiting beliefs that we hold on ourselves. So fear of failure can have a variety of causes in your life. So what's caused them could be things like, we could go back to your upbringing. So people who you grow up with in your household, were they highly critical of you? Were they unsupportive? And these things are more likely for someone who will experience a fear of failure if there's always been that expectation, because they felt that you could never live up to what your family or friends wanted during childhood. So this can continue throughout your adult life and make you quite fearful of making mistakes, because you were never taught that mistakes were actually okay. So you tend to not make them as adults. Some definitions of fear of failure. This is something where people have different definitions of what it means. For some, it's about not achieving exactly what they had planned. And for others, it might be just creating an expectation that's too high to live up to. So you're creating that expectation on yourself ultimately. The next one I have is trauma. So people often experience a difficulty after a traumatic event, something that's happened that they've worked really hard on and they've failed at. And this may cause them to be afraid of repeat trying in the future, because they've experienced this failure and it's been quite traumatic for them. So they decide not to go back. Okay, so people might have panic attacks during presentations. That's an example of that. They may have been ridiculed, heard a little bit of back chatter from their performance. And all these things contribute to feelings of fear. So there's negative consequences resulting from the failure, such as losing your job, or not getting into college, these sorts of things. These are all risk factors and contribute. So while everyone may be afraid of failing from time to time, it becomes quite a serious thing when it really inhibits your ability to pursue your goals and achieve the things that you want to accomplish in your life. So how does fear of failure affect your mental health? So fear of failure can take a toll on a person's belief in their own abilities, which will therefore affect the motivation that they have to actually pursue their goals. So this happens in a variety of ways, and I've listed a few over the next couple of slides. So we're going to start with low self-esteem. People often who have a fear of failure also engage in a lot of self-talk about themselves. They have low self-confidence, and this makes it really difficult for them to pursue their goals. The next one is poor motivation, and this sort of goes hand in hand through the procrastination side of things. When people have a fear of failure, they also have an experience of a lack of motivation, and they start to really procrastinate around starting difficult projects and working towards their end game. So something that seems really challenging, or it might involve learning new skills, some people just really refuse and they just give up and don't get involved at all. And number 3 on this slide is perfectionism. And this is really about failing at something that has important consequences that has really affected their life or job. So perfectionism is a webinar all on its own. So yeah, that's a big one. People who are perfectionists about what they do. The next one I have on the next slide is self-sabotage. This isn't uncommon for people who have a fear of failure. It's like a self-handicapping of themselves where they really undermine their chances of success. So research has found that students who have a fear of failure often engage in self-handicapping behaviours that actually start to limit their academic success and really prepare them for the and it prepares them for failure. So that's sort of one thing that people tend to do to themselves. And it's not just about students, it's about people, corporates, people in just everyday life. We tend to, with our self-talk, we tend to self-sabotage. With our procrastination, we tend to self-sabotage because it limits our motivation. All these things are really interlinked. The next one I haven't talked about much, but in the future, I really do want to do a webinar on this. And this is shame. Shame is a massive emotion, and the fear of failure that often stems from experiencing shame or embarrassment. It can really trigger a feeling of worthlessness. And when you're trying to be in a place where you want to be your best and protect yourself from disappointment and regret and sadness and all the things that come across in the feelings of shame, it's quite a debilitating emotion to hold onto. So again, that's really something that in the coming weeks I'm going to have a chat about. I don't know whether I will do it with vulnerability and shame. They can go hand in hand. The 6th one I've got is self-perception. So how you consider yourself depends on how you see others. So you don't want them to look at you as a failure, and it can lead to a fear of failure. So this is the way you perceive others looking at you. Okay, so I've also listed here a few physical and emotional symptoms that have been linked to a fear of failure. So a few of the physical symptoms, we've got insomnia, you know, and this can be linked to overthinking, severe anxiety. We've also got stress causing chest pains and things like panic attacks. Those sorts of things can come in here. We're also faced with, when we're faced with unanticipated situations, this is really when panic attacks and symptoms of whether it's profuse sweating, digestive distress, joint and muscular pain, headaches, difficult breathing, and all these things are just physiological responses to being in fear of failure. Okay, so also another one there, feeling a constant fatigue and tiredness due to a lack of motivation. And again, that lack of motivation really does go hand in hand with procrastination. And self-determination, which is a webinar that I did last week. Self-determination is a driving force behind motivation. So procrastination affects that. So some of the emotional symptoms in my research, I found people have insecurities and excess worrying about what will happen if they fail or what will go wrong. They tend to procrastinate to avoid work or assign tasks because this can trigger the anxiety, this fear of failure. Unnecessarily realization of how something can go wrong if it will, and exaggerated feelings of fear, anxiety, and a sense of real panic, excuse me, when we're trying to sort out the risks of what that new task may be. So when you're unsure about something, you're unsure about the outcome, you tend to weigh up the risks involved, and even going through that can cause a fear of failure. So here's just a few tips on how we can debunk your fear. Fear of failure is treated in a way that really does depend on a variety of factors and how you experience this fear of failure itself and how it actually impacts your life. So in many cases, we can find that self-help strategies really help you cope with these feelings of fear. So fear is really not something that you can ignore or turn your back on. It can really influence your mental health and can cause severe depression and anxiety if it's not appropriately managed in any way. So if a fear of failure is impeding your ability to function normally, it's really important that you seek out professional help because it can have adverse effects in just about every aspect of your life. So I really want you to delve into that and lean on those feelings and work out whether it's something you need to talk to a professional about. So there are a number of strategies that you can use to help reduce your feelings about fear. And I've just listed a few. So know your fears and understand why you are actually afraid. So in this, it's basically about doing a little assessment, checking in on yourself and getting to understand the root cause of how you developed the fear of failure in the first place and what causes the fear of failure. So what are the triggers? So you realize that your fear comes from, just as an example, a strong desire that you want to be perfect. And then you shift your attention to how you can progress in that perfection. So remember, progress is not perfection. So you really need to enjoy the process of improving at something other than being a perfectionist at it. Learning to be kind to yourself is a massive thing here. Determine if your efforts are really working towards the direction of your success. So in the example of behaviors like procrastination, you really need to identify these self-sabotaging and destructive behaviors that you might be incorporating into your daily life around your fear of failure, because this will really help you change your mindset. You will learn to respond differently and have a different perspective to stressful situations. And I do talk about that a little bit further on. So you need to consider the outcomes. So sometimes thinking about the worst possible outcome and then coming up with a plan on how to deal with it can help reduce your anxiety and help you pursue your goals, because you pretty much have weighed up the pros and cons, and you know what the potential outcome is going to be. So you've pre-prepped yourself for what may or may not happen. Focus on the things you can control. This is a massive one. A lot of people go about the planet so worried about what they can and can't control in their lives. And instead of worrying about the aspects and the situations that you have power over, you tend to focus your energy on all the things that you can't actually control. So it's about reversing that and really leaning into the fact that put your energy into the things you can control and the things that you have power over. It's really important to really focus on the things that you can control. And this one here, plan ahead. When you're facing a challenge that might trigger your fear of failure. So this is where we work on developing alternative plans, just in case your initial efforts don't go as planned. You can have a plan B or even a plan C, and this will help you feel less anxious about the situation and give you a sense of security that you know that you've got something to fall back on. The next one I've got is have a new perspective. So redefining failure, changing the way you think about failure and changing your perspective on that will really help reduce your feelings of fear. Failure is a part of life. And it can be a really important opportunity for people to learn from and develop new skills. I do a bit of work with resilience, and that's one of the skills that I'm talking about there. So it can certainly be disappointing, but it's also something about maintaining that healthy perspective on life towards the potential benefits that you can get from failing from time to time. Remember, success is often reached through a series of progressive failures that lead to new information, new research. Imagine scientists, they're constantly doing experiments, and they're constantly, they're not working because they're trying to find a cure for something. And each time they do an experiment and it doesn't work, they learn from that, they take notes, they understand it, and they're able to use that information to move forward and do the next experiment. So it gives you a sense of new skills and new strategies on how to tackle things. Use positive thinking. So avoiding that self-negative talk, removing those limiting beliefs, because those things can really undermine your confidence about who you are and really create feelings of anxiety. You really need to work on a more optimistic approach, I suppose, to help you maintain a higher level of motivation and get you out of procrastinating. The last one here I've got is take control. So be the boss of your thoughts and the situation you are in. So if you're feeling that your projects are becoming overwhelming and potentially it's screaming failure, the idea is to really not to worry about it. You need to break it down into more manageable portions and really understand that the decision process that you're making is a way of setting you up for success. So smaller portions, and being able to move forward in those smaller portions, setting up different tasks for different days, that sort of thing, instead of thinking you have to do it all at once. So it's about really not feeding the obsession that you have with failure. It's really about finding a way to overcome the way it frees you from your worries. Because there's always family, there's always loved ones that can help you with these tasks. And it's really remembering that you're not alone, and it's about really taking care of yourself and being kinder to yourself. So in summary, I've sort of approached this a bit of a different way this week. Usually I just sort of rehash a little bit of information that we've gone through. But I just found that this was quite a big subject. And if you want to go back over the webinar, you can seek that information back out. So here I have, a fear of failure is extremely self-limiting. It causes stress and anxiety. It can impair your present relationships, your goals to succeed, and how to be productive. And it doesn't matter whether this is home, school, workplace. Having a fear of failure can really put you into a place of isolation and lead you into a place of feeling quite lonely and depressed. Having this fear of failure is something that everyone experiences from time to time. But if it becomes too much and it becomes problematic, this is when you need to understand that the feelings are becoming quite persistent, and having the practice of self-compassion and taking small steps, working towards building your confidence and managing your fears. And just on that note, if this is really something that you're struggling with, having this fear of failure, please reach out. Again, it will affect all aspects of your life. As mentioned earlier, if you don't do something, you need to do something. It's not something you can turn your back on. I have quite a few techniques that I can help you with in my toolbox. So if this is an issue for you, remember your tribe, remember to reach out and seek professional help if this is becoming problematic. So fear can be also seen on a more positive note as a stepping stone for achievement. It can help you learn from your mistakes. It can be the main ingredient in moving forward, for example, in your career. If you fail at something, it does not mean you have to stop where you are and you cannot move forward. So rising from the fear is a sign of progress. It's not a sign of failure. So you learn to understand that you can take new steps, go in different directions, change your perspective towards achieving your dreams. The fear of failure may have developed quite early on in your life, and at a certain time you may have been embarrassed, that you may have been bullied, there may have been a trauma around the experiencing of failure, but allowing it can really bring a positive or negative result to your life depending on how you manage it. So some people develop a standard closer to perfection and strive for excellence since they're afraid of failure. That's just an example. These are referred to perfectionists. Perfectionism, as I've said, is a webinar on its own, and it's not a good place to be in either, to keep yourself in such high regard, because as soon as you do fail, excuse me, as soon as you do fail, you tend to really sort of dive down deep into, anxiety and depressive thoughts and self-limiting thoughts and those sorts of things. So that is the end of our webinar. Again, I want to thank you all for joining me. Before we sign off today, I just want to mention to everyone, again, I have a free workshop on how to reshape your life. I'm running this on Friday, the 27th of May at 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Daylight Saving Time. So this workshop is really about delving deeper into those emotions. It's about getting into the nitty-gritty of those feelings that are surrounding your limiting beliefs and really focusing what's important to you as the individual. It's a way of helping you develop a strategy for change that you can use to manage and push through your comfort zone and really help you change all aspects of your life if you choose to, and help you reshape your life. Again, this is a free workshop. Jump on board. All those who register, you get obviously the hour with me, you get a workbook, and obviously, you can contact me anytime regardless in regards to any of these topics. So thank you everyone for joining me today on the webinar Fear of Failure, Is This Your World? For those who registered, again, as I mentioned earlier, you will receive a copy via email. You can find me on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, obviously, and Instagram. I'm also back on Twitter. We will add that in there on that slide. And you'll also find me on Anchor, a podcast called Empowering Ordinary Women. I have a few audios that I need to upload to that, so that's pretty exciting. And what we have on Friday, the 20th of May, oh my Lord, we are very close to the middle of the year. Where has the time gone? Next week's webinar, Friday the 20th of May, we will be talking about burnout and the signs of burnout. So when we're talking about that webinar, it's really about discussing the topic of burnout and gaining some tips to regain some balance in your life. Which I'm sure a lot of people would love to have. So again, thank you for joining me for this webinar, and I will now sign off, stop the share,